Welcome to another episode of If They Knew. Perhaps, and I kind of feel like I say this from time to time or every time, my favorite episode so far. In this episode, it is for me a personal moment of life coming full circle. This man, this doctor, changed the trajectory of my life in my early 20s, in my front side of motherhood. And I am forever grateful in the compassion, the kindness, the truth, the honesty, the transparency that the short period of time that we met at a seminar and the impact that it made. And in part, this is one of those butterfly effect moments where in part, me meeting him back then in my early 20s leads to the big idea, leads to my trajectory as a pediatric and prenatal chiropractor, leads to creating a podcast called If They Knew, with the intention and purpose of putting some light out into this world and shining into those spaces of suffering and darkness, a little bit of light to lead your way forward. So who is my guest today? My guest today, by definition, because I'm going to read this bio because it's important to understand who it is you're about to tune into. Dr. Larry Palevsky is a New York State licensed pediatrician who utilizes a holistic approach to children's wellness and illness. Dr. Palevsky received his medical degree from New York University School of Medicine in 1987, completed a 3-year pediatric residency at the Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City in 1990, and served as a pediatric fellow in the ambulatory outpatient care department in Bellevue Hospital, New York City from 1990 to 1991. Since 1991, his clinical experience includes working in pediatric emergency and intensive care medicine, inpatient and outpatient pediatric medicine, neonatal intensive care medicine, newborn and delivery room medicine, and conventional, holistic, and integrative pediatric private practice. Dr. Palevsky is a diplomat for the American Board of Integrative Holistic Medicine and a past president of the American Holistic Medical Association. He received his pediatric board certification in 1990 and passed his pediatric board recertification exams in 1997, 2004, and 2011. In his current pediatric practice, Dr. Palevsky offers well child examinations, consultations, and educational programs to families and practitioners in the areas of preventative and holistic health, childhood development, lifestyle changes, nutrition for adults, infants, and children, safe alternative treatments for common and difficult to treat acute and chronic pediatric and adult conditions, vaccination controversies, mindful parenting, and rethinking the medical paradigm. Additionally, he teaches holistic, integrative, pediatric, and adolescent medicine to parents and medical and allied health professionals, both nationally and internationally, and is available for speaking engagements worldwide. You can hear Dr. P on his weekly podcast, Critically Thinking with Dr. T and Dr. P, on Thursday evenings at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and can listen to more of his podcasts and interviews by visiting www.drpalevsky.com. I don't always read those. I don't even bring them up because I think bios are such a interesting who am I game. But it is important. It is important, necessary to look, to listen at who this man is, at the experience, at the wisdom that he carries in his mind, in his heart, the service that he has lended to countless families and healthcare practitioners. He hasn't just changed my life. I would venture to gather he's changed a lot more. And he has been one of the voices that since the 2020 COVID beginnings of all that we have gone through, he's been one of those voices that I go to sit by, that brings a fire to my soul, that brings a steadiness to the chaos, that brings curiosity to the unknown. This conversation, as we kicked off, I said, hey, let's do about 20, 30 minutes. Let's keep it digestible. And it was probably double that. This is one you need to keep. you need to come back to. Listen, re-listen, break it up into pieces, because the premises that we dive into, the thoughts, the ideas, the tactical tools that he shares can serve you for a lifetime. And I believe with everything that I am that we don't need more information. We need more integration and implementation. We don't need to learn more. We need to unlearn the things that are not serving us. And this conversation with Dr. Palevsky will give you just that. So please welcome to If They Knew, Dr. Larry Palevsky. Hey, everybody. Dr. Devin back with a life full circle moment here. A pediatrician who entered my life as I was raising up my very first baby, and in one moment changed the way I saw everything. Exposed me to some big ideas in pediatrics that changed the way I mothered, changed the way I saw children, parenting, healthcare, and life has never been the same. So now I get to bring him here. Please welcome Dr. Larry Palevsky.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Devin. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, we're going to jump into all the things. This episode is dedicated to the mothers, the fathers, and the children that we each serve in our practices, and to everybody out there doing the best that you can. It's been, parenthood in general is a gauntlet, right? And then you add 2020, COVID, chaos, all of it on top of it. And now more than ever, parents are in the fire sorting through what's real, what's not, what's true, what's not. And end of the day, we're all doing our very best to raise up the next generation. And I just want to take a moment to say thank you to you too for your service over these last few years to be at the forefront of the heated conversations. What's that been like for you?
Well, thank you for saying that. What it's been like is the feeling the pressure of what it is to bring the truth out to the surface, and to not be afraid to speak the truth, and to challenge people to critically think. That even if I say something, or some of my colleagues with whom I speak say something, check in with yourself. Go to your intuitive place. Go to your ability to think, go to your ability to research, go to your experience, and say to yourself, is this person, guy, woman, saying what you believe is in integrity, is in truth? And do your research, look into it. And we are at a place in time where we have spent centuries outsourcing our sense of self, outsourcing our sense of knowledge, our expertise, so to speak. And we live under the umbrella of they say, therefore it is. And I think the consciousness, COVID brought out the possibility of shifting consciousness, whereby we realized with humility and no blame, but accountability and responsibility and elevated consciousness that we are ultimately responsible for coming to our truths, not because of they say, but because of I say, as part of us, as part of a community of I says. So we're not living as individuals, but we're living as individuals amongst a community. And so we're not moving as the masses. We are, lions, not sheep, so to speak. And that we're accountable. We realize that we've made mistakes. We have acknowledged our transgressions by listening to sources that we thought we had, we thought were giving us what was in our best interest. And with humility and with no shame, we were able to acknowledge, we may have made a mistake. Yeah, and to learn that we're not going to do that again. We're going to insource, not outsource. And we're going to check in more. We're going to do more research. I find it fascinating that, if people go to buy a house, They check the boiler, they check the heater, they check the water heater, they check the AC, they check the windows, they check the doors, they check the floors. Is there mold? Is it a new kitchen, an old kitchen? What about the bathroom? How old are the pipes? How old is the attic? The roof. They check everything. Inspection. I mean, they go through days. They might go back to a house 3-4 times before they say, you know what? There are no leaks in the basement. There's no mold. Electricity, okay, may need upgrading, but we can do that. But yet, when it comes to being told this is a vaccine, blind rolling up the sleeves. And I think that we are responsible for that as a total, and that we are also responsible for helping ourselves not do that again.
Amen. Coming out of that humility and curiosity and responsibility, like these things, that wherever you go, there you are. We're just going to keep repeating these lessons at higher and higher costs, I think, if we don't get in there and do the work. And
sure.
So, I invited you, and why we, share these conversations is I love getting to ask people, but what's the big idea? What's the major premise? Because over the last few years, we can look back at all of these arguments over masks and vaccines, but those were symptoms of the problem. And if you meet people at, you're right, I'm wrong, I'm right, you're wrong, there's this discord. But if we zoom out, and I heard you share about this at the Health Freedom Symposium, if we go to the premise that we're all operating from, then we might be able to have a curiosity conversation to go, what if we got all this wrong? And if we talk about the premise, then the outcomes would shift. So if I say, Dr. P, what's the big idea? What's the major premise that you wish more people, more parents got when it comes to pediatrics?
It goes back to what I said initially, which is if they say, then true or not true. I have learned in my pediatric education that just about everything that children present with is based on an infection. Everything. A nose symptom, a sinus symptom, an ear symptom, a throat symptom, a chest symptom, a skin symptom, an intestinal symptom. Everything was, oh, there's something going around. Oh, there's something passing. Oh, there's a virus going around. Oh, you have an ear infection. You have a throat infection. Oh, the lymph node is swollen. It must be because you have an infection. Your child has a fever. Oh my God, there must be an infection. And so that's the way I was trained. That's the way I was educated. That's the way I was trained. And then I had a rude awakening. And I had a rude awakening over almost 30 years, where I realized that most symptoms that children present with have very little to do with an infection. And that is a mind twist. That's a mind blow. Because before evidence-based medicine, before the implementation of algorithms and protocols and doctors being submersed in the I have to do what the insurance companies say, I have to do what my computer system says, I have to do what the hospital says, we were able to do what's called a differential diagnosis. We were able to, see the presentation of symptoms in a child, and we would be able to discuss it, and we'd be able to work it through, and what are the most likely causes? And we do sometimes 5, 7 different reasons a child could present with the symptoms. And over the last, I would say since the mid to late 90s, we have watched everything become an infection. Everything. And so I have been practicing a more holistic, and I know the word holistic gets, some of these, woo-woo, vibrational, but if people actually understood what holistic medicine meant, they would actually cower. They would probably like feel shame, because everything about holistic medicine is based on the science of the body. Everything. Except that the people who control the narrative try to demean it because they, for some reason, think that what they have is more superior and better than what anyone else could have. And, I, as a physician, ask everyone to realize that they have a choice as to whether or not that's true, and go investigate that choice. So what I have found is that most of the time, when children have an acute illness, it is almost never an infection. And so we have really missed the boat on what brings children to develop acute illnesses and what are the contributing factors or causative factors that bring on the onset of symptoms. And I'm going to say something that's probably most interesting and maybe a little revelatory for most people. The onset of an acute illness is actually one of the greatest ways the body can work to save itself from harm and dying. And I can substantiate that with such unbelievable basic science that we learn in medical school. And so I don't say it flippantly. I don't say it carelessly. I don't say it without substantial backing. That the onset of an acute illness, the mucus, the cough, the vomiting, the diarrhea, the fever, the rash, the tearing, the just being not feeling well, is actually part of the mechanism by which the body saves itself from harm and ultimately saves itself from dying. And I would say 8 or 9 or maybe even close to 10 times out of 10, the medical profession and the culture suppresses that process. And by suppressing that process, we inherently weaken the body, and we don't allow the body to complete the process of saving itself from harm, because the body gets sick to actually remove all of the inflammation, the toxicity, the wastes, the impurities that have accumulated in a short or semi-short period of time. And we can look at what those wastes, impurities, toxins, and inflammation come from and understand that, the body has a threshold. There's just so much the body can tolerate before it expresses that pinnacle, that peak, when it says, all right, you've put enough wastes, enough inflammation, enough toxicity, enough impurities into my system, whether it be in body level, mind level, spirit level, where we can't take it anymore. And we're going to do what we need to do, which is get this stuff out. And if we can't get it out in the normal ways in which the body gets it out, Dr. Devin, we're going to have a massive explosion. And that's actually the way in which we save the body from harm, so that we don't keep those impurities, waste, toxins, and inflammation in the cells, in the tissues, and in the organs. And as a chiropractic physician, that your job is not to heal anybody, but is to just put people in the place where their natural capability of healing can optimally occur. And that can be done in Western medicine, in chiropractic medicine, in Chinese medicine, in homeopathic medicine, in Ayurvedic medicine, in naturopathic medicine, if we go down to the core principles of each of these practices, which is the body has the innate capacity to heal, and our job is to facilitate it and allow it to happen and support it while it does its job. And so what I've seen over 25 plus years is that chronic illness is an inability to accept, acknowledge, understand, support that an acute illness is the way to save the body from harm and to save the body from dying. And so by suppressing it because of our fears and because of the narrative that they say everything that a kid has is an infection or you'll die, plus the fact that we've missed the passing along of folklore from great-grandmothers to grandmothers to mothers to daughters on how to heal things at home, which has been replaced by, well, you have to call the doctor. Did you go to the doctor? We need a prescription. And so I've been practicing medicine in pediatrics for, over 20 years, where very little, if any, prescriptions can be written and have to be written, because I have watched how to practice true Western medicine in a way that honors the body's innate capacity to heal, not necessarily engaging in the narrative that every time a kid gets sick, there must be an infection that needs to be treated. And that takes education.
It does.
Right?
And time. Yeah.
Right. But I remember when I was a medical student and resident, parents weren't as afraid of a fever. They understood what needed to happen when a flu-like illness came about in their child. All right, get undressed, get into bed. I'll put up the kettle. I'll draw the bath. We'll close the lights, get under the covers, sweat it out. I'll turn the TV on. We'll put a cloth over your forehead and we'll rest. And we'll quiet down. And we'll hydrate you. And we'll give you a warm bath. And I might put, a chopped onion in a plastic bag and put your feet in them and wrap a sock over you. And I'll do these weird things that allow for the body to do its process without intervening with medicines. And those have been lost because our culture made parents believe that they needed the doctor foremost and utmost. And we told parents, you know what? Your kids don't have to be sick anymore. You don't have to take time off from work. Your kids don't have to miss school. We're going to deny the process of healing in your body. We're going to shorten the time frame. And we're going to get your kid better in 24 hours. So, so you can go on with your life rather than understanding. And this is the key, Dr. Devin, this is the key. When the body gets an acute illness, it can take 5 to 7, maybe 10 days for the healing process to unfold and resolve. And we have lost that basic understanding of how the body heals, what the body needs to heal, and how to support the body over that time. And that information is lost.
And the patience in today's, attention span and quick fix culture, the patience to sit with yourself in symptoms or sickness or process, and then the child, right? Like you mentioned, to take time off from work, or there's this hustle culture that, quite frankly, is keeping us sick and fueling that, as well as the lack of resources. If you go into the tactical, can you share with our listeners that are hearing you going, God, what he's saying is so true. Where do I start? When you embark on that empowerment curiosity journey and say, okay, I need new tools. They've been lost, but I want to remember the way. Where do you start?
Well, you start by understanding that children absorb information on 7 levels, maybe 8. They absorb information from their genetic material. They absorb information from being in utero. And then once they're born, they absorb information from the air, from what they put in their mouth, because it's not always food, from what is put on their skin, from what is injected into their body, from what comes at their nervous system, and then from who they are at the highest level in their spirit. So there are 8 avenues that I know of by which information can get into the body. And one important lesson to understand is that pure material gets into the body and impure material gets into the body at every level. At every level, all 8 levels. And the body has one end game, one goal: remove impurities. And if you just look at the way the body works, everything we do is constantly geared towards removing impurities. Right? We exhale. We produce mucus. We sweat and smell. So now you have the lungs and you have the skin. We urinate. And I know people are going to argue with me that urination is not a way to promote the removal of impurities. Let's fantasize for a second. Let's say lungs, skin, and kidneys are responsible for helping the body remove impurities. The intestines and the nervous system. How do we remove impurities through the nervous system? Well, number 1, we sleep. Number 2, we rest. Number 3, we exercise. Number 4, we scream. That's one of the ways in which the body just releases some tension, some impurity that's built up. And so the body is, the end game is to always remove impurities. And so while we're living, everything we're doing is getting rid of impurities. So what happens if, in the 8 ways in which information gets in, 2 of which are done once we're born, what happens if the body can't keep up? What happens if there are, and I'm going to use chiropractic language, what happens if there are subluxations or obstacles? All right, let's use the word obstacles. What happens if there are physical, emotional, mental, psychological, social, spiritual impurities, obstacles that hamper the body's ability to keep up with getting rid of the impurities? Well, we know from basic sciences that the accumulation of the impurities will cause cellular, tissue, and organ dysfunction. It will. That's by definition a truth. Just based on what we learned, all of us, whether it's chiropractic school or medical school or naturopathic school or even homeopathic school. I mean, this is what's true. And so the vital force, again, homeopathy language, chiropractic language, naturopathy language, and Western medicine language, is diminished. And the body is programmed to die when it's time to die. And if it knows that it's not ready to die, it has to make sure that those impurities don't continue to create dysfunction. And ultimately, if the threshold is reached, whether the impurities came in at the psychological, the social, the physical, the mind, the spirit level, ultimately the body will physicalize and create a symptom as a way for us to say, whoa, okay, slow down. Something's being taught here. Something's happening. My body is trying to work something out. What do I need to do? Maybe I'm going too far. Maybe I'm doing too much. Maybe I'm eating the wrong things. Maybe I'm breathing in air that's not good for me. Maybe the injections I put into my body are starting to, affect me. maybe the skincare products I have, maybe I'm eating the wrong things, maybe I'm not sleeping well, maybe the relationships I have in my life are a problem. And so my body is telling me, stop. And don't put any more impurities in until I can allow the rest of my body to complete the process of cleaning me out. And that is ultimately the removal of the obstruction, is stop putting the causative factors, the contributing factors in, so that your body can do the rest. And you know, as a chiropractic physician, that all you're doing is facilitating that and hoping that your patients will come to some understanding of the causative factors, of the processes by which they engage in life that continue to bring the symptoms on. Well, doctor, it hurts when I hit my head. Well, you know, maybe you want to think about not hitting your head. Right. So this is basic science. And this is basic Western medicine. And it's not difficult to practice. It's easy to learn. We have to undo, and we have to create the curiosity so that people get out of their certainty and allow for the learning and the incorporation of new ideas so that they can go forth and experience it. And once they experience it, they can get to know whether the things that you say and the things that I say actually make sense to them, because they've learned it in real time, because they were given the opportunity to learn it, and not necessarily just do what they say.
And the word that keeps coming up through everything is trust, right? We've lost this trust in the spirit, the intelligence inside of our systems. We've lost this trust inside of ourselves. And I think that's been systematic in many ways in our approach to things, or what we've grown up in. And I can remember sitting with you as a 21-year-old mom going, God, my kid keeps having these things. And you hit me with this bomb of, that vaccines were not what I had been told they were, that the well child check was not really about well children. It was a, systematic schedule to create, I think, long-term customers into this sick care system. Talk to me about how, what you've seen. Did we land on 36 or 37 years of practice, did you say you've been in?
I graduated medical school in 1987. And here we are in 2023. So
just a little experience, right? And you've seen, I'm one of thousands of mothers that you've watched face this, and then we have to restore the trust in ourselves first before we can truly serve it to our children. How can mothers, fathers reclaim that trust within?
Okay, great question. And wow, what a 21-year-old revelation. I barely understand how many mothers and fathers have had that because of things that I and my colleagues have said. It's quite heartwarming to hear. So they say vaccines are safe. They say vaccine injury is rare. They say that unvaccinated children are disease carriers. And if you are apt to just give away your power, your intellectual ability, your heart, because of your fear, because of your need to trust an authority outside of you, then you're going to hear they say, and you're going to just walk along and feel like your hand is being held. But what do they say in the parent community about listening to those three statements? And that's what was very humbling for me when I first learned that there may be a problem with the science, the policy, and the manufacturing of these injections in 1998. What I found was that the parents who listened to they say were experiencing things that you didn't hear about. You didn't hear about the fevers, the seizures, the inconsolable crying, the sudden infant death syndrome, the eczema, the asthma, the cancer, the drop in platelets, the neurodevelopmental disabilities, the loss of speech, the banging the head against the wall, the decreased social skills, the remaining in Pampers for the rest of their lives. They said it, but nobody heard it. And I learned in the early 2000s that parents have been they saying for decades before I knew anything about it. And so, I had some really amazing teachers in medical school and residency. They were practicing pediatric medicine in New York City since the 1940s. And they drilled into our heads, always listen to the mother. She knows the kid. And, as a doctor, I'm like, nah, I know the kid. I know. Until I realized what they were saying and the impact. I'm not there 24/7. Who is? Who is? And sometimes, parents have a distorted view of what's really going on because they're myopic. They're right in there. They can't see the broad view. And that's my job. My job is to take a 30,000-foot view of what's going on. But when I started to hear the they say stories that conflicted with the they say authority, vaccines are safe, vaccine injury is rare, and unvaccinated children are disease carriers, I started to see something that I never imagined I would see. And so then I started to see it happen. And then I started to see the health outcomes of children who were not vaccinated. And I started to see the health outcomes of children who were partially vaccinated. And I started to see the health outcomes of children who were fully vaccinated. And I started to see the unbelievable numbers of children in our country and in the world who are developing one chronic inflammatory condition after another. One health problem that just stayed all day, every week, every month, every year. And I started to see that those children in the fully vaccinated population, hands down, had more of these chronic illnesses than children who were partially or not vaccinated at all. And not only that, I started to see the families who were doing their own experiment, where their eldest was vaccine injured. Their second may have been partially vaccinated because they stopped realizing what happened to the first. And then they'd have a couple of more and they didn't give any shots. And across the board, what did the parents say? My children who are unvaccinated are 100% healthier, recover quicker, and are less sick than those who are vaccinated or partially vaccinated. And so I never asked parents to offer me this information. I just listened. And, when something happens once in a blue moon, it's a random event. When something happens 10 times, it's not a random event. When it happens thousands and hundreds of thousands of times, do you still listen to they say? Or do you listen to the experiences and not gaslight those families who have had those experiences? And so I listened. And then I did a deep dive into the science that they say doesn't exist. And I found so much science that explains the dangers of these injections and their ingredients. And why would I trust a company that could make a product and not have any liability if there are any damages to it? Like, would you buy a car without a warranty? Would you? Usually not, right? Would you buy a product from a company that you knew had no liability? No. But for the vaccine manufacturers, you would, because of the blind trust. And the thing is, they've been crystal clear, transparent for decades. They have told you before 1986, we were getting our asses kicked in the courts. There were monetary settlements against us for millions of dollars because kids were being injured and we were being sued and we lost. And they went to Congress and they said, we can't keep manufacturing these products if we are being held to be so liable. And so in 1986, Congress removed almost all liability and granted them almost complete immunity to the liability. But the manufacturing processes did not change at all. So what happened to all the kids before that who were granted rewards for the dangers that happened to them, for the damage that happened to them? That still continued. But what did the mantra? The mantra came, no, we're doing great science. We're doing unbelievable science. And injury is rare. And I'm telling you, Dr. Devin, when you pick up that rock to actually ask them to prove it in the vernacular, they ain't got nothing. There's nothing there. Now, for a parent who trusted they say, that's a rude awakening when their child either dies or is permanently damaged. And, you know, when you have 1 in 5 children with neurodevelopmental disabilities, and you have 1 in 36 children with autism, which fits into the umbrella of 1 in 5, and you have 1 in 10 children with ADD, ADHD, and 1 in 20 children under the age of 5 with seizures. Do you think something's happening to the brains of our children? And I think what COVID has done is it's not only made parents aware of the corruption in regards to how the COVID shot is manufactured, how little science there is around the safety, how zero effective studies were done around this injection, even to the point of parents realizing that this isn't even a vaccine. They get smart and they say, well, is this the only time that we have to worry about this corruption? And so parents are picking up that rock. And it's a rude awakening when you have trusted they say for so long. And that's why when we started this discussion, I said, we are at a time in life where we need to really question whether outsourcing our authority, outsourcing our interagency, outsourcing our expertise is in our best interest. Because we are realizing that the 3 letters that, stand for just about any regulatory, and I use the word regulatory in quotes, any regulatory agency, are dirty 4-letter words because there's no regulation going on. And despite the fact that we are finding this out, people still don't know. And so you have to ask yourself, where in God's name are the scientists? Where in God's name are the medical doctors? Where in God's name are the people who we put our trust in? And the answer is, stop looking for them. We are the ones in charge.
Mm.
And that's a rude awakening. It's a rude awakening because a lot of people in this country behave as if, upon hearing this information, this would be the first time in history any leaders or any officials would ever do anything to hurt their own people. And take a good look at history. That's the only thing government has ever really done.
Oh.
And that's the only thing that corporations have ever really done, is take advantage of its own people.
And it's, for listener, for a couple of moms I know will hear this episode and feel lonely and angry and guilty, to sit and cry with mothers over the last decade of, why would they lie? You start to peel the layers of this onion, and you do feel all of those feels, and it is a road back to yourself, and it's the most liberating journey you're going to go on. But it's not to say it's easy, and to have this curiosity and to have the humility to say, I didn't know, but I do now. And
Right.
I made choices. I will not forget sobbing with you in that room. We were in Denver when you were teaching. And I replayed the moments where I literally held him down for his shots against everything in my mother's intuition, going, I don't want to be here. This is wrong. And then he would have these fevers, and he would sweat from the time. I can replay those moments like they're yesterday, because I do still carry guilt about going against my intuition in those moments, and then bringing him home and feeling bad, going, what did I do to you? What did I let them do to you? And then confronting all of that. It's a roller coaster of emotions and these processes, but facing that is our hope for a different future, and to choose a different way. I imagine you've seen a countless times, and much heavier. Luckily, in my situation, the injuries and the deficits that we faced were healable. I mean, you wouldn't know it if you know him today, but I still walk beside parents who are still very much in the mud of what has been created in the wake of these well child checks that we just go along.
I mean, thanks for sharing that story. I mean, I can only imagine the number of mothers and fathers and grandparents who, hear yet another story and know that you're speaking to them. And, I don't think there's ever a time a mother or father doesn't feel guilty about something regarding their child, what they should have done, what they didn't do, what they could have done, what they did wrong. I think it's inherent in just parenting in general. But then you add this layer, and the rage that you speak about, the fury, I'm going to get you back kind of thing. And I've seen it. I understand it. There's nothing more powerful and scary than a scorned mother. I mean, nothing. I mean, just get out of the way. Just get out of the way. And, there's nothing more powerful than a bond that a mother has with her child. And this is not to take away from the dads, because, dads do what dads do differently than the way moms do, usually. I mean, again, I don't want to generalize, but there is a pattern that's common. But, at some point, you see that as a mom, you can transform that anger into action. And you can transform that anger into empowerment. And you can transform that anger into healing. because no one will ever, ever, ever pull that crap with your kid again.
Yeah. And you and I have seen it at these different events or these different, where we've been on the front steps. I've seen you're there in New York. You were in the fire across the country really over the last few years. And you look at the mothers who've been leading the charge way before COVID even happened. This has been mounting. And it's why for me, people ask, how do you stay sane? How do you stay hopeful in the face of all of this? It's like, have you met some of the mothers and the women at the forefront of this? Like, there's no turning back. There is no there's only one way this pans out. We're in this for the long haul. And it does give you that breath of and we've seen it over the last few years. Tides are turning and it's slow and it's big, but man, tipping point is coming. And so I love all this that we poured into mothers, and we could talk for hours, but as I let you go and get to, the next phase of your service today, can you speak a message of hope, of responsibility, accountability, whatever comes to your heart, to practitioners, to the pediatricians, to the doctors, to the chiropractors, to the homie, to the ... who are in a position of leadership and service? Talk to them for just a moment on the role that we can play and step into.
Oh, great question. There's something that happens in the education of practitioners in our country and in our world that creates certainty, which is, to me, one of the most dangerous words and the most dangerous places to be. And certainty removes creativity. Certainty removes curiosity. Certainty removes flexibility. Certainty removes curiosity. Did I say that twice?
Yeah, but it's important. I think that's the antidote right now.
Right. And certainty removes the ability to not know. And there's something that's happening in the education of our doctors, and not just medical doctors, but anybody who gets a license to take care of patients. There's something that's been happening. I've seen it since the mid-90s, whereby everything is about certainty. And so if you are a practitioner, if you're a parent, if you're anybody, I would question your certainty. And I would question your knowing. There's a little diagram that I draw out. I know what I know. I know what I don't know. I don't know what I know. I don't know what I don't know. And that last one is where most of life needs to work. That's where we have to operate as practitioners. And so I wasn't trained that way. I had to grow into that. I had to go through the pains of being able to say, I don't know. Right? Because finishing residency, I know everything. I mean, I'm a doctor. I can know everything. And, I went through my periods of knowing and getting my ass kicked, and not knowing and getting my ass kicked also. But I knew one thing, and I still know one thing. If I don't know, I still have the ability to find out. And, over the years, I would hear parents say to me, well, is this going to work? And I learned for many years now, I'm able to say, I don't know, let's find out. Right? Because what is the piece of our development that we forget? We forget our child development. Because when an infant begins to look into the world and explore the world, the infant explores with, I don't know, but doesn't say, I won't go forward unless I know.
Mm.
So an infant will walk into a room, never having been in that room, and will not stand at the door and go, let's see, is it safe for me to walk in here? I don't know. Am I going to find things that I like? What if I don't find something I don't want to play with? What if I don't find anything I want to play with? This is too unknown. I'm not going to go in here. No, toddler just goes. And that's because a toddler embodies the word curiosity.
Mm.
And that part of our development has been wiped out. Or in many of us, it may not have even been developed because we were stopped from being curious because we were told no. Telling a toddler no doesn't work. And I think 11 out of 10 parents will say to me, my kid won't listen to me when I say no. I'm like, yeah, well, they're not supposed to.
Mm.
Right? Even in my 30s, in my mid to late 30s, I was giving talks to parents of toddlers, positive ways to say no. Because children are supposed to do what they're not supposed to do. That's how they learn because they're curious. And they don't have the foresight to know whether it's dangerous. That's our job. Our job is to put them in positions that are safe for them, but to allow them to learn because they're curious and because they don't know. And the only way for them to know is to have the experience. And that part of development in our educational system, and I use the word educational system with quotes because it's not an educational system. It's an indoctrination and a training system. We can talk about that for a couple of hours.
I was gonna say, I gotta have
But
you now.
right. But the bottom line is that part of development is still within us. And so embrace it. I don't know what I don't know. Let's see. We'll find out. I know it's worked before, but I don't know if it'll work with you. Give it a try.
Mm.
So this is one way to diminish anxiety. Because if you're curious and you're willing to go into the unknown, then your anxiety should quiet because you're allowing yourself to at least go through the process.
Mm.
And we have lost the art of process because we have held on to the logistics of results. Give me the end point. Give me the end point. Right? But process is the process by which we learn. That's where all the revelatory answers come from, is process. And so that would be my message. Be curious, be humble, know what you don't know, and be able to say, I don't know what I don't know, so that you can learn. Otherwise, we're not having relationships anymore. We're having tyranny. And that's where we are now.
We could talk for hours, and I know that you do regularly with some of my favorite people, Dr. Sherry, and so I'm going to make sure you guys get lots of links because this is not, to your point, the process. It's not an end point of like, hey, we're trying to shift you away from what we've known into something else, and that's it. Once you get that, no, this is a dance. This is a dance. We'll dance for as long as we're here.
Right.
And you and Dr. Sherry and Dr. Northrup, you all do such a beautiful job of exemplifying what's possible for practitioners. And so, guys, I'm going to make sure you get lots of links where to stay connected with Dr. P. I'm going to, I'm sure, invite him back to play with us many times over because I'm committed to creating spaces of curiosity where we can come back together and find our center again. And I believe that 2020 is the greatest blessing of our lifetime if we allow it to be so. And I think it's medicine that we're all going to take as we culturally and collectively heal through what our systems have led us to here. And so I
That's
thank you
great.
for being such
Yeah,
a
thank you.
powerful leader and voice, and you raise the bar for me, you raise the bar for parents and for practitioners. And I pray, safety and continued prosperity in your journey of that leadership. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Devin. Do you mind if I give an example? I just thought of something, and I know, we're running on time here, but
Stop
I
you.
just something came right through me just now, and I was like, all right, I got to do it. So, what is the example of curiosity? What is an example of curiosity? Certainty, unknown. So, let's say you come up to me and say, Dr. Larry, vaccines are safe. Now, what is the common response from a physician to you? That's a bunch of bullcrap. You must be reading the internet. I'm a doctor. I know the right answers. You couldn't possibly know what you're talking about. They've been proven to be safe. Okay. So that's the milieu. That's the certainty that we're in. What does it look like if we're curious? So that's tyranny. That's the way to hierarchically diminish somebody else, and basically wipe them out and not give them any airtime at all. So what does it look like if we're using curiosity, if we're actually in relationship? And you come up to me and say, Dr. Larry, vaccines are safe. And I look at you and I say, really? Tell me more. Help me understand how you know that. Give me an explanation. I'm curious to know where you get your information from, and I'd like to hear more. This is one example of where our shift must go, which is out of the tyranny and into the relationship. And, we're in a place in our country where, someone like RFK Jr. decides, to declare his presidency for the 2024 election, his bid. And the first thing that comes up is anti-vaxxer. And so, I would look at anybody who sees that and say, why would they only say that? Or, well, so what if he's an anti-vaxxer? What does it mean to be an anti-vaxxer? Right? What does he know something I don't know? Right? This is the kind of positioning that I believe we need. And the reason I wanted to do that is because I was talking in abstract, and I wanted to give an example of what does it look like to operate in curiosity? What does it look like to operate in unknown? What does it look like to actually operate in relationship rather than in hierarchical tyranny, which is where we are in our world today? So
inner tyranny, right? One is a closed door, one is an open door, one is limit, and one is limitless. And right. So have that power of discernment. That is true restoration of power to the people, right? As we enter the next election, we need to own we have choice. We are no victims of circumstance in this dance. Right. Thank you for that. And I hope it lands, because we're gearing up. We know headed into an election year, it's about to get even more wild, right? So,
well, yeah, it's assuming we ever even have elections in the first place, but
right. So many that there's another hour we can invite you back for. Thank you so much for your time, and blessings your way. Everybody, if we can support you in any way, like I said, I'm going to make sure you get links to get connected, because you're not alone in this journey. So stay curious, stay hopeful, and just know that you are loved. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
So, what'd you think? What did you get? What did you receive? What were your big idea light bulb moments from this episode of If They Knew with Dr. P? I had so many. I've got a full page of notes, and that's just one pass at the words that he just shared. They say you need 10,000 hours to become a master at something. And I'm not sure how many hours I have in motherhood, but I know I have a long way to go. I don't know how many hours I have in chiropractic, but I know I have a long way to go. I hope that I never arrive there, because that's the biggest thing that came up with this, as he invites us to look at where we turn ourselves over to they say, where we box ourselves in with our own certainty. This tyranny, this idea of oppression, sometimes comes from within. Maybe all the time comes from within. When he said that certainty removes curiosity and creativity, I felt that. And it's not that if I loosen my grip on what I'm most certain about, that I become an innocent bystander of whichever the way the wind blows, but it invites opportunity. We don't need more information. We need more integration. We don't just need to learn new things. We need to unlearn the things that don't serve us anymore. Where can we let go? Where can we make room? I invite each of you to take a look at your health. I invite each of you to take a look at your family's health, the generations before you and coming from you. Where are you at, and are you happy with it? Is what you're doing working? And chances are, if you're like me, you're looking for ways to make it better. I want my kids to live a far brighter life than I have. I want my grandkids' way through the world to be easier, more beautiful, and more prosperous, because the foundation of the road I left behind served them. But that work is in today. You want to change the world. You change what we give our children. And this is it, guys. Conversation about pediatrics becomes the way that we see the world. Most parents are choosing health choices for their children because of the choices that were made for them. It's the biggest thing I hear. Well, I go to the pediatrician. I'm giving my kids shots. I got them, but it's not the same. The world's different. The schedule is different. The toxicity is different. And all you have to do is look at the health trends of children to know that what we are doing is not working. We have got to individually and collectively learn better, do better. Because if not now, when? How bad will we allow it to get? And I do believe that this blessing of COVID and blessing of all that we are living in the midst of gives us a united time to take a look at things. One of my very, very good friends said to me back in 2020, you want to know how I know this is big? Is God has the whole world's attention on this thing. What if I could get curious about that? There must be something to learn here. If we just do what we've always done, we will get what we've always gotten. It's time for innovation. It's time for disruption. It's time to get creative, to get curious. And I am so eternally grateful to people like Dr. Larry Palevsky, who are brave enough to be curious, because it is not easy work. I used to think that certainty was hard. You gain the muscle and then you stand in it. And that's the road. It's brave to be certain. And it is brave to be convicted. And that is important in its own time, right? But 2023, for the best to be yet to be, we will have to be curious. We will have to be. So I hope this spoke to your heart as much as it did to mine. And I can't wait to have him back. Please share this with someone that you know needs to hear it too. Share your thoughts and comments because we're always listening. And I have other conversations from Dr. P and more stories, tips, tools like this inside the Big Idea Network. So come play with us. If you're ready to be the change, to be the light this world needs, come play with us. I'll see you soon.